March 2025. The California heat seemed capable of melting the asphalt, making the air in the Los Angeles suburbs thick and suffocating. At the used storage facility, a long row of metal roll-up doors stood silent under the harsh sun, each one a sealed tomb of stories and lives left behind. Leo Maxwell wiped the sweat from his brow. At 45, he had turned his hobby of hunting for old treasures into a small business. He made a living from auctions of abandoned storage units, a gamble where the prize could be a valuable antique or just a pile of worthless junk. Today, he had won the auction for Unit 237 for $500. It was a decent price, as no one else was interested in a unit that had been neglected for over a decade. With a heavy thud, Leo heaved the metal door open. A wave of stagnant air, carrying the scent of dust, old paper, and forgotten time, rushed out. Inside, everything was coated in a thick layer of gray dust. A few pieces of outdated furniture, cardboard boxes softened by moisture, a rusty children's bicycle. Nothing looked promising. Leo sighed and got to work. He pulled out each item, inspecting and sorting it. After nearly an hour of laboring in the sweltering heat, he reached the far corner of the unit. Tucked behind an old wardrobe was an object he hadn't noticed at first. A large, dark brown leather suitcase, a style from the 90s. Its brass latches were tarnished and covered in a layer of greenish rust. Leo was intrigued. He was a lover of vintage items, and this suitcase looked valuable. He tried to pull it out. It was strangely heavy, much heavier than if it had only contained clothes. His heart beat a little faster. Could it be gold bars or a rare coin collection? Dreams of quick riches were always part of this game. He set the suitcase down on the concrete floor. The two latches were stuck fast. Leo took a pair of pliers from his toolbox. With a bit of force, he broke the first latch. Snap. Then the second. Snap. He hesitated for a second, took a deep breath, and flipped the lid open. It wasn't the smell of money or antiques. It was a foul, sickly sweet and dry stench of long-suppressed decay, a scent of death that shot straight up his nostrils, making him recoil in horror, his stomach churning. Leo stared inside. Through the thick, old and discolored plastic sheeting, he could faintly make out the shape of something that shouldn't be there. The curve of a rib cage, a femur, and amidst the jumble, a human skull, staring blankly into the void. He didn't know it then, but his decision to buy the storage unit for $500 was not just a losing bet. It was about to reopen a forgotten chapter of history and solve a mystery that had been shrouded in silence for 30 years. The wail of police sirens shattered the silence of the storage facility. Soon, Unit 237 was cordoned off with yellow tape. The forensics team, in their white hazmat suits, moved methodically, turning Leo's storage unit into a complex crime scene. The case was transferred to the cold case unit of the Los Angeles Police Department. In charge was Detective Evelyn Reed. In her late 40s, Reed possessed nearly infinite patience and a gaze that could see through the dust of time. Her office was a testament to her obsession with the past. Whiteboards covered in photos, notes, and red strings connecting victims to unanswered questions. She was the one who gave a voice to the forgotten. A few days later, the first forensic report landed on Reed's desk. Based on dental records and a small piece of jewelry that remained, a necklace with a pendant engraved with the letter C, the victim's identity was confirmed. It was Clara Hayes. Reed opened the original case file from 1995. It was pitifully thin. Clara Hayes, 22, was reported missing on July 15, 1995. The photo clipped to the file showed a girl with a radiant, slightly naive smile, her hazel eyes full of great ambition. She had come from a small town in Ohio with dreams of becoming a movie star. In 1995, that dream seemed within reach. Clara had just landed her first supporting role in an independent film, and critics were starting to take notice. She was described as a natural talent, a classic beauty in the heart of modern Hollywood. But then, she vanished. Her family in Ohio had reported her missing after weeks of being unable to contact her. The initial investigation was cursory. Clara's roommate said she had gone out for an audition and never returned. Her agent confirmed she had missed an important meeting. There were no signs of a struggle in her apartment, and her bank account remained untouched. At the time, Los Angeles was a city overwhelmed with crime. A young woman with Hollywood dreams suddenly disappearing was not uncommon. The most accepted theory was that she had grown disillusioned or found a different path and had left of her own accord to start a new life, cutting off all ties to her past. The case was quickly classified as no evidence of foul play and closed, sinking into the vast archives of the LAPD. Until today. "She didn't leave," Reed murmured to herself, her eyes fixed on Clara's photo. Someone wanted her to disappear. Detective Reed began her work by piecing together fragments from two timelines separated by 3 decades. Modern forensic reports gave her a much stronger start than her colleagues had in 1995. The skeletal analysis showed that Clara had died from a massive blow to the back of the head with a blunt object, causing a skull fracture. The time of death was estimated to be around mid-July 1995, perfectly matching the time she was reported missing. The theory that she had left voluntarily was completely debunked. Clara Hayes had been murdered. The killer had acted with ruthless calculation. He hid her body in the suitcase, probably right after the murder, and then brought it to this storage unit. But why a storage unit? And who had rented it? Reed sent a team to the Store It company. The records from the 90s were all on paper, stored in old metal filing cabinets. After hours of searching, they found the contract for Unit 237. It was rented on July 16, 1995, just 1 day after Clara disappeared. The renter signed as John Smith, a name so common it was useless. The address provided was also fake. More importantly, the rent for the first 5 years was paid entirely in cash, leaving no transaction trail. After 5 years, no one came to pay the rent, but due to a clerical error, a mistake by some long-gone employee, the unit was never put up for auction. It just sat there, a forgotten tomb, until Leo Maxwell came along. The killer was careful, Reed told her team in a meeting. He created an information black hole. A fake name, cash, an anonymous storage unit. He believed Clara would never be found. On her whiteboard, Reed drew a mind map. At the center was Clara's photo. From it, branches extended. Boyfriend? Enemies? Career? The 1995 file was too sparse, with only a few names mentioned in passing. Reed knew that to solve this case, she couldn't rely on forensics alone. She had to go back in time, to speak with the ghosts of the past, the people whose lives had intersected with Clara's in her final days. She needed to find those who were still alive and still remembered. Time can fade memories, but it rarely erases powerful emotions like love, jealousy, or fear. Reed began her journey to find the people connected to Clara's life. First witness, Arthur Sterling. This name appeared in the original file as the ex-boyfriend. In 1995, Arthur Sterling was a film producer in his 40s, wealthy, powerful, and well-known in Hollywood circles. He was 20 years older than Clara. In his initial statement, he said they had broken up amicably a few weeks before she disappeared, and that he knew nothing of her whereabouts. Reed found Arthur Sterling living in a massive mansion in Beverly Hills, a modern fortress surrounded by high walls and security cameras. The man who opened the door was now in his 70s, with white hair and a slow gait, but his eyes were still sharp and full of arrogance. He invited Reed into the living room, where a young lawyer was already waiting. "Detective," Arthur began, his voice still carrying an echo of authority. "I said everything I knew 30 years ago. It was a tragedy, but I was not involved." He repeated the old story. They had broken up due to different life goals. Clara wanted to focus on her career, and he wished her well. Everything was very civilized. But when Reed tried to press for more details about their relationship, about her final days, Arthur's lawyer immediately intervened. "My client has answered the question. We will not be discussing this further." Reed left the mansion with the feeling that an invisible wall was being erected. Arthur Sterling was hiding something. Second witness, Sophia Hayes. Reed found Clara's older sister, Sophia, living a quiet life in Oregon. Sophia, now nearly 60, had the same eyes as her sister, but they held a sorrow that had been etched deep for 30 years. When she heard that Clara's body had been found, she wept. Sitting in her cozy kitchen, Sophia told a completely different story. "An amicable breakup? That's a blatant lie," she said, her voice trembling with anger. Arthur was a control freak. He was obsessed with Clara. He chose her clothes, her friends, tried to control her career. "My sister wanted to get out. A few weeks before she disappeared, she called me. She was crying and said she was scared. She said, 'Sophia, I don't think he'll ever let me go.'" Sophia's testimony directly contradicted what Arthur had said. It painted a completely different portrait of the powerful film producer, a psychological abuser, a man obsessed with possession. Third witness, Marco Vega. The last name on the list was Marco Vega, Clara's co-star in the independent film she was working on before her death. Reed found him living in Florida, retired from acting and running a small acting school. The interview was conducted via video call. Marco, now a middle-aged man with wrinkles around his eyes, seemed hesitant when he heard Clara's name. "God, Clara, it's been so long," he said, looking away. "She was so talented. We were very close on set." Reed pressed him. "How close, Mr. Vega?" Marco sighed, finally admitting it. "After she left Arthur, we had a brief romantic relationship. Very brief, just a few weeks. Clara wanted to keep it a secret. She was afraid Arthur would find out." "Were you afraid of Arthur?" Reed asked. Marco nodded. "Yes. One time, he came to the set. He pulled me aside and said, 'You'll stay away from her if you know what's good for you.' His voice was calm, but his eyes weren't. I believed him." Reed hung up. The picture was becoming clearer and also more complicated. Arthur had lied about the breakup. He had a motive, a violent temperament, and had threatened another man out of jealousy. On her whiteboard, Reed drew a red circle around Arthur Sterling's photo. He was the prime suspect. But suspicion was not proof. After 30 years, she needed something solid to break through his wall of silence. The case seemed to have hit another dead end. Arthur Sterling was protected by a team of expensive lawyers and a 30-year gap in time. There were no witnesses to the murder, no murder weapon. Frustration began to creep into Reed's team. Just then, a call came from the forensics lab. "Detective Reed, we have something for you," the forensic specialist's voice said over the phone. "We dismantled the entire lining of the suitcase. It was very well made. And stuck deep in a seam in the corner, we found this." An hour later, a small evidence bag was placed on Reed's desk. Inside was a rectangular piece of paper, yellowed with age, fragile and almost crumbling. It was a concert ticket. The Eagles, July 14, 1995, at Dodger Stadium. July 14, 1995. Just one day before Clara disappeared. Reed put on gloves and carefully picked up the ticket. It almost disintegrated in her hand, but two details made her heart pound. In the upper corner of the ticket was a very specific tear, as if someone had accidentally ripped it while putting it in a pocket. And in the bottom corner, there was a faded ballpoint pen mark scrawled with the number J12. "A seat number," Reed whispered. "Row J, seat 12. This could be the breakthrough she was looking for." Clara had gone to a concert the night before she died. Who was with her? Could it have been the killer? But hope was quickly dashed. Ticket records from 30 years ago were nearly impossible to retrieve. Dodger Stadium had changed its ticketing system multiple times. There was no way to know who had bought the ticket for seat J12. This lead also seemed to be a dead end. Reed stared at the ticket, feeling the wall rise up before her once again. She couldn't sleep that night. The image of the ticket haunted her. The next morning, with dark circles under her eyes, she gathered her team. "I know this sounds crazy," she said, "but we're going to try something different. Forget the official records." A young member of the team, a digital forensics expert named Ben Carter, spoke up. "What do you mean, Detective?" In 1995, the internet was still in its infancy, but it existed, Reed explained. Forums, news groups, personal websites. Fans loved to take pictures at concerts. Maybe someone was there, took a photo, and years later posted it online as a memory. I want you to search for everything related to the Eagles concert on that night. Fan forums, old photo archives, personal blogs, anything. It was a search for a needle in a haystack. The team began the tedious work, scrolling through thousands of old websites with outdated interfaces. Hours passed, then 2 days. Hope began to dwindle. And then Ben shouted, "I've got it! I think I've got it!" The entire office rushed to his screen. Ben had found a personal blog created on a GeoCities platform last updated in 2008. The blog's owner was a die-hard Eagles fan. He had posted a series of amateur photos he had taken at the 1995 concert. Most were blurry and of low quality, but there was one photo. It was taken from behind, facing the stage, but the lens had accidentally captured a corner of the VIP section. "Zoom in," Reed ordered, her voice tense. Ben enlarged the photo. The image broke into pixels, but it was still clear enough. In the row marked J, the camera had captured a woman with long blonde hair and a slender build, identical to Clara Hayes. She was turning her head to speak to the man sitting next to her. The man had his back to the camera, but the gold watch glittering on his wrist and the carefully styled hair. Reed had seen it. In the mansion in Beverly Hills. It was a young Arthur Sterling. "Oh my God," someone on the team whispered. But that wasn't all. "Wait," Reed said, squinting at the screen. "Look at the row behind them, row K." Ben moved the cursor. Sitting right behind Arthur and Clara, looking towards them with an unreadable expression, was a young man. Though the photo was blurry, Reed recognized him. It was Marco Vega. He was there too, and he had never mentioned it in his statement. In an instant, 30 years of silence were shattered by a single mouse click. The photograph changed everything. It not only placed Arthur and Clara together on the night before the murder, but also introduced a key witness into the picture, a witness who had lied. Reed summoned Marco Vega again. This time, the confrontation was in Los Angeles. When Reed placed the printed photo on the table, the color drained from Marco's face. His confidence evaporated, replaced by a look of panic. I can explain, he stammered. Then explain, Reed said, her voice as cold as ice. Finally, Marco confessed. He had been worried about Clara. Knowing she was meeting Arthur at the concert, he had bought a ticket and followed them to make sure she was okay. I saw them arguing, Marco said, his voice trembling. It was bad. After the concert, in the parking lot, Clara was crying. She said, "It's over, Arthur." He grabbed her arm, but she pulled away and left. That was the last time I saw her. Why didn't you go to the police? I was scared, Marco admitted. The next day, when I heard Clara was missing, I was going to call. But then Arthur called me first. He said, "Whatever you saw last night, forget about it. If you know what's good for your career." I was a coward. With Marco's testimony, Reed had enough to get a search warrant for Arthur Sterling's house. This time, when she arrived at the mansion, no lawyer could stop her. Arthur Sterling stood there, old and frail, as Reed's team swarmed his home. His arrogance was gone, replaced only by defeat. The search lasted for hours. In an old office in the basement, a place Arthur rarely used, they found a collection of old planners. Reed flipped to the 1995 planner. On the page for July 15, written in neat handwriting, was a chilling note. "Settle C, for good." But the most damning evidence came from the forensics team. Using luminol, a chemical that can detect blood traces even after they've been cleaned, they scanned the concrete floor of the basement. Under the purple light, a large patch glowed eerily. The traces of a struggle and a pool of blood that had been desperately cleaned 30 years ago. A DNA sample was taken from the bloodstain. The results came back in 24 hours. It was a perfect match for Clara Hayes. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Arthur Sterling finally broke. Reconstruction of the crime. Night of July 14, 1995. After the argument in the parking lot, Clara had made it clear that their relationship was truly over. Arthur, obsessed with losing control, could not accept it. July 15, 1995. Clara went to Arthur's house to pick up the last of her things. She just wanted a quick, clean break. But Arthur wouldn't let her go. Their argument escalated in the basement, where she had stored some of her belongings. Arthur begged, then threatened. Clara remained firm. In a moment of madness, as Clara turned to walk up the stairs, Arthur shoved her hard. It might have been an impulsive act, an attempt to keep her there. But it became a fatal one. Clara lost her balance, fell backward, and her head struck the sharp edge of a metal work table. She died instantly. Silence filled the basement. Arthur's rage vanished, replaced by sheer panic. His career, his reputation, everything he had built was at risk of collapsing. But panic was quickly replaced by cold calculation. He was Arthur Sterling. He could fix anything. He dragged Clara's body to a hidden corner, meticulously cleaned the floor. The next day, he went out and bought the largest leather suitcase he could find. He stuffed Clara's body inside, rented a storage unit in a remote location under a fake name, and paid for 5 years in cash. He believed he had buried his secret perfectly. He created the story of Clara running away, threatened Marco into silence, and went on with his life as if nothing had happened. For 30 years, he had almost succeeded. After 30 years, justice was finally served, albeit late. Arthur Sterling, faced with undeniable evidence, was convicted of second-degree murder. His health deteriorated rapidly after the trial. He died in a prison hospital just 2 years later, taking his secret to the grave. For Sophia Hayes, the verdict brought no joy, but it brought peace. Finally, she could give her sister a proper burial. In a small cemetery in Ohio, under an old oak tree, a simple headstone was erected, engraved with the name, Clara Hayes, 1973-1995. A dream cut short. Sophia used part of her family's inheritance to establish the Clara Hayes Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting young actresses in need and fighting against abuse in the entertainment industry. From Clara's tragedy, a positive legacy was born. Clara's story is a tragic reminder of the price of ambition and the dangers of obsession. A secret, no matter how well hidden in a leather suitcase under 3 decades of dust, will eventually find its way to the light. And Leo Maxwell, the man who started it all with a $500 bargain? He donated all the contents of the storage unit to a charity. He didn't want to keep anything from that place, except for one thing. In his small office, among the antiques he collected, sat a small glass box. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion, was a yellowed concert ticket for the Eagles. Sometimes Leo would look at it, not as a gruesome memento of a murder, but as a reminder that every old item, every abandoned storage unit, every forgotten object might hold a story, patiently waiting to be told.